I was 17 the first time I disobeyed my parents badly enough to change all of our lives. And it started with a leaky roof and a voice coming from the room I'd been told my entire life was just storage. We were in the middle of one of those Midwestern summer storms that rattle the windows and turn the sky green. My dad was out on an HVAC call, my mom had driven my little cousins back home after having them for the weekend, and I was alone in the house, watching rain stripe down the kitchen window and trying not to think about the fact that in 5 weeks I'd be leaving for college, something my mom alternated between bragging about and resenting. The ceiling in the back hallway had been staining for weeks. My dad kept saying he'd get to it before it got worse. The storm decided not to wait. I heard the drip first, then the soft plop of water hitting carpet. I went to investigate, barefoot in my old t-shirt, and that's when I heard it. A sound I'd never heard in this house in all my 17 years. A voice. Not the TV, not the radio, not my own echo. A hoarse, unsure voice, coming from behind the one door we were never allowed to open. "Hello," it said, as if the word itself was something fragile. I froze in the hallway. Our house is a small 3-bedroom ranch. I know every creak, every pipe groan. That door at the end of the hall had always been the storage room. Full of junk, my dad would say. Old equipment, Christmas decorations, nothing you need to be messing with. When I was little, the doorknob had one of those plastic child-proof covers on it. When I got older, I didn't think about it much. The door was always closed. No one went in or out when other people were around. The idea that there could be a person behind it had never even crossed my mind. "Hello," the voice said again. Is someone there?" The hairs on my arms stood up. "Who's there?" I asked before I could stop myself. There was a shuffling sound like fabric on fabric, then a rattling clink metal on wood. "It's Daniel," the voice said. Are you the girl from the pictures?" For a second, I thought maybe this was some elaborate prank. My dad was not a prank guy, but my cousins were. Then my brain caught up to the name. Daniel. My parents had a story they trotted out when older church ladies asked my mom, in that nosy way, "You only ever had the one?" They'd say they'd had a son once. Before me. "He was born very sick," my mother would say, eyes misting on cue. "He didn't make it. God called him home." People would make sad noises, pat her hand, and then look at me with that extra layer of tenderness people reserve for rainbow babies. His name, they always said, was Daniel. I thought of the leaky ceiling, the way the water was probably seeping down into the wall. I thought of that voice, cracked and hopeful, saying my name like a question. "Yes," I heard myself say, even though I had no idea what it meant. I'm Megan." "Megan," he repeated, like he was tasting the word. "You got big." I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was 17 years of following rules. Maybe it was the way my mother's voice still echoed in my head from that morning, snapping at me because I'd suggested I might not come home every single weekend from college. "Family comes first," she'd said. "We're not losing another child to the world." Maybe it was just the storm outside, electricity in the air making everything feel inevitable. Whatever it was, I put my hand on the doorknob. For the first time in my life, it turned. The door wasn't even locked. That almost made me angrier than anything else later. Not that they'd barred me from the room with deadbolts and chains, but that they'd just trained me so well that it never occurred to me to try. The smell hit me first. Not bad exactly, but stale. Old sweat, disinfectant, something sweet and sour under it like spilled juice. The room was darker than it should have been. The one small window was covered by a heavy blanket nailed over the frame, a thin strip of daylight leaking around the edges. My eyes adjusted and I saw him, a man or a boy or something in between, sitting on a narrow bed in the middle of the room. He was skinny in that soft way that happens when you don't move much, all pale limbs and knobby knees. His hair was shaggy and badly cut. There were straps, actual leather straps, looped through the sides of the bed, like someone had tried to make a dye hospital restraint system and gotten bored halfway through. 2 of them lay across his lap, buckled loosely. His wrists were free, but I could see the red marks where they hadn't been earlier. He looked at me like I was a ghost. I realized I was staring back the same way. His eyes were the same green as mine. Same weird little bump in the middle of the nose. Same sharp chin my mother always said I got from your daddy's side. You're real, he said, and his face did this strange, complicated thing like a smile and a flinch at the same time. I thought maybe I dreamed you. Who are you? I whispered, though I already knew. He reached under his pillow with hands that shook and pulled out a photograph, the edges soft from being handled 1,000 times. It was one of our family portraits from church, taken when I was about 10. My parents in the middle, my mom's hair sprayed half to death, my dad in his one good suit, me in a dress I hated but smiled in anyway. I remembered that photo. It had hung in the hallway for years. I did not remember anyone taking a second copy and giving it to someone locked in a back room. They told me this was my family, he said. They said that was mom and dad. That was you. They said you were busy. At school, at church, at your activities. They said someday when you were older you'd come say hi. His voice cracked on the last word. But you never did. I thought maybe, he trailed off. My brain was doing somersaults, both refusing and trying to stitch this into my understanding of the world at the same time. My parents told me you died, I said. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew they were true. My mother's rehearsed story. My father's tight jaw if anyone asked follow-up questions. The way they'd shut down any conversation about it. He was very sick, my mother always said. It's too painful to talk about. I got sick, Daniel said simply. That's not the same thing. My heart was pounding. Do you live here? I asked idiotic question that it was. He looked around at the tiny room, the bed, the small dresser, the TV on a stand with a built-in visor, the stack of worn tapes in the corner. I don't go outside, he said. Not anymore. I used to go to a place with other kids, but then mom said they were mean. That they laughed. So she said I was safer here. His gaze flicked toward the covered window. She said the world doesn't understand. A drop of water hit my shoulder. The leak. I looked up. A brown stain was spreading on the ceiling. Another drop fell, landing on the blanket near his feet. The roof, I said stupidly. It's leaking. It does that sometimes, he said. Mom hates it. She says if anyone comes to fix it, I have to be extra quiet. So I try. There it was again, that word. Quiet. How many times in my life had my parents praised me for being such a quiet baby? Such a quiet child. How often had they told me not to make a fuss, not to draw attention, not to be like those kids at the store who screamed? Suddenly it felt less like a compliment and more like a training program. How old are you? I asked because apparently my brain had decided to work through the basics in completely the wrong order. 20, he said. 21, maybe. I lose track. 20. I did the math. My mom had me at 39. She'd always been weird about that, about being an older mom. But if Daniel was 20, that meant he was 3 years older than me. He was born when my mom was 36? 37? Old enough that a baby with problems would have been considered a risk. I felt like I was going to throw up. Our parents, I managed. They told everyone you died. He watched my face carefully. Please don't be mad at mom, he said quickly. She cries when she talks about it. She says people are cruel, that they say God is punishing you. She says I'm her test from God. Sometimes she says that. He paused. Sometimes she says I'm her cross. When I look back now, I can see a dozen moments that should have tipped me off. The way my parents were weird about sleepovers, not because they were worried about other people's houses, but because they didn't want other kids in ours. The fact that our storage room always had fresh food smells coming from under the door, but nobody ever carried boxes in or out. The way my mom would disappear down the hall with a tray and tell me to mind your business. I thought she was talking about laundry. The resentment that flared in her eyes whenever a woman at church would sigh and say, "You're lucky, Carol, just the one. I don't know how people manage more." "You don't even know," she muttered once under her breath. I thought she meant me. I hadn't. I'm not mad at you, I said, because whatever else I was feeling, it wasn't anger at him. If anything, everything else I'd been angry about, my mom reading my texts, my dad insisting on a curfew, their refusal to let me choose a college more than 2 hours away, suddenly felt like background noise. This was the real thing under everything else. This was the secret everything was built around. I heard the crunch of tires in the driveway, the slam of a car door, my mother's voice carrying like it always did, even over the rain. "Megan," she called. "We're home. Come help with the groceries." I panicked. "I have to go," I whispered. "Don't tell them I was here, okay?" His face fell in a way that made my chest ache, but he nodded. "Okay," he said. "It was nice to see you." Nice. As if I just popped in for coffee. I slipped out, closed the door, and did what I'd always done. I pretended nothing had happened. I helped my mother bring in bags of food. I nodded at stories about my cousin's tantrums. I laughed at my dad's rant about traffic. My heart hammered so hard I was sure they'd hear it, but they didn't. They were too busy being themselves. That night, I lay in bed, listening to the house settle, and tried to make sense of it. There were only two options my 17-year-old brain could come up with. Either I was crazy, or my parents had been lying about the most fundamental thing in our family for my entire life. If you told me that morning that I'd choose the second option, I would have called you insane. By 1 a.m. I wasn't so sure. The next day, while my parents were at church, I went hunting. Not in the back room, not yet. I went up. Our attic was one of those cramped crawl spaces accessible by a fold-down ladder. My dad used it for old tools. My mom used it for seasonal decorations. I'd only been up there a handful of times, usually under supervision. "Watch your step," my dad would say. "Don't fall through the ceiling." I pulled the ladder down, climbed up, and pointed my phone flashlight around. Boxes, old suitcases, a broken fan, and in the back, a plastic storage tub labeled baby stuff. I could have told myself it was mine, that my mother had just decided to stash my old onesies up here instead of the hallway closet. But she was sentimental. She kept my things where she could see them. My christening gown was in her hope chest. My baby book was always out when nosy church ladies came to visit, ready for a flip-through. This box was not for display. I dragged it toward the opening, sweating in the summer heat, and popped the lid. The first thing I saw was a faded blanket, yellowed around the edges. Then a hospital bracelet. Picked it up. The plastic was stiff with age, but the writing was clear. "Bennett Daniel," it said. "Male. 6 pounds 3 ounces. My last name. I dug deeper. Hospital bills stamped paid. A pamphlet about caring for a child with cerebral palsy. A Polaroid edges curled of a baby in a hospital bassinet. A mess of tubes and wires, tiny fists clenched. His head looked too big for his body. His eyes were half open. Someone had written "Our Miracle" on the back, in my mother's handwriting. There was a birth certificate. Name, Daniel Thomas Bennett. Mother, Carol Jane Bennett. Father, Thomas Mark Bennett. Date 3 years before mine. I sat back on my heels in the sweltering attic and stared at it. In one hand, I held proof that my parents had a son. In my other, metaphorically, I held 17 years of being told that son was dead. Downstairs, the house creaked. Somewhere on the other side of the ceiling, Daniel sat in his dark room, probably watching one of the same VHS tapes over and over. I put everything back as neatly as I could with shaking hands and climbed down. I didn't confront them right away. Part of it was fear. Part of it was, I don't know, grief maybe, for the version of my childhood I just lost. For all the times I told myself I was their miracle, their one surviving child, their gift from God. For the realization that maybe I'd been something else entirely, the second chance they could parade around in public, while hiding their firstborn in a room like a family shame. Over the next week, I went back to the back room 3 times. Always when my parents were out. Always with my heart in my throat. Daniel was cautious at first, answering my questions in short sentences, glancing nervously at the door. But he wanted to talk. God, did he want to talk? What do you do all day? I asked once, sitting on the edge of the bed, careful not to touch the straps. He shrugged a weird jerky motion. His movements were a little off, like his body didn't always listen to his brain in a straight line. TV, he said. Sometimes Mom reads. Sometimes Dad puts on music. I do puzzles. He pointed to a stack of jigsaw boxes. Many of them were for toddlers. Most of the pieces were bent or missing. Have you ever been outside? I asked. He brightened. We used to go to a place, he said, with swings and a pool. People there talked funny. Talked funny how? Like me, he said, and I realized for the first time that his words were a little slurred, his consonants soft. I hadn't noticed at first because I was too focused on the content. They had chairs with wheels and sticks, and the lady with the red hair made me stack blocks. He looked down at his hands. Then Mom said the lady was mean, that she laughed when she thought I wasn't listening. So we stopped. I don't go outside now. How long ago? I asked. He frowned, thinking hard. When I was little, he said. Before the big fight. Big fight. Mom and Dad shouted, he said. About doctors. About institution. Dad said he can't do this forever. Mom said God doesn't give you more than you can handle. Dad said apparently he does. Then they didn't talk to each other for a long time. My chest hurt. I could see it so clearly. My father, proud business owner, man of the house, hating the idea of a son who didn't fit his picture. My mother, equally proud, equally image-obsessed, unwilling to let the town see what God did to us. Caught in the middle. A baby who never asked to be anything but alive. And then there was me, the bonus, the redo, the proof that they weren't cursed, the child they could show off. Do you know why they told people you died? I asked. He blinked. They did, he said, and the floor tilted under me. They told me I was too special for the world, he went on. They said some people can't understand. They said it's safer this way. Safer for who? I asked before I could stop myself. He tilted his head. For Mom, he said like it was obvious. I think that was the moment I stopped thinking about protecting my parents' feelings and started thinking about something else. What my obligation was as a supposedly decent human being to the person they'd hidden. Confronting them did not go well. I waited until a night when I couldn't hold it in anymore, when my mother made some comment about how God never gave us more than we could handle because he knew one child was our limit. And something in me snapped. You mean two, I said. He gave you two. You just locked one in a bedroom. The silence that fell was thick. My dad's fork clinked against his plate. My mother's face went white, then red. What did you say? She whispered. I met him, I said. My heart pounded, but my voice stayed surprisingly steady. Daniel. In the back room. You know, the one I've been told my whole life was storage? You might want to fix the roof, by the way, it's leaking on him. You had no right, my father exploded, slamming his fist on the table. That door is off limits. So is lying, I shot back. You told me he died. My mother started crying. Not soft tears, but big heaving sobs. We didn't lie, she said. We simplified. For your sake. You were a child. You couldn't understand. I was 17 when you told Mrs. Keener at church that your only baby died at birth and God replaced him with me, I said. How old did I have to be before I could handle the truth? 30? 50? My dad pointed his fork at me like an accusation. You don't know what it's like, he said. To have doctors tell you your son will never walk, never talk right, never live on his own. To have people look at you with pity everywhere you go. To have them whisper that you must have sinned, that God is punishing you. So you punished him instead? I asked. You punished him by making him live like a ghost? We kept him, my mother sobbed. We loved him. Everyone told us to send him away, put him in a home, forget, start over. We refused. We brought him home. We cared for him. We did what God asked. Did God ask you to cover his window with a blanket? I said. Did he ask you to strap him to a bed? He has seizures, my mother said. He falls. The straps are for his safety. Then why the blanket? I pressed. Why the secrecy? Why does he think I just never got around to visiting him? She flinched. The world is cruel, she said. People say terrible things. They stare. They point. You don't know Megan. You don't know how they treat people like him. I grew up seeing those kids in town. They were mocked. Their mothers were pitted. I swore that would never be my life. So instead you made his entire life a prison so yours could look good, I said. The words tasted like acid, but once they were out, I couldn't take them back. My father stood up, chair scraping. Enough, he said. This conversation is over. You will stay away from that room. You will not fill his head with ideas. In a few weeks you'll be off to college anyway. Your mother and I will handle it. Handle what? I demanded. Keeping him a secret until you die? He looked at me with a hardness I'd never seen before. Don't you dare threaten us, he said. We could have sent him away and had our nice little family and you'd never have known. We chose the harder road. We kept him. We sacrificed. Everything we do for you kids. You didn't do this for us, I said quietly. You did it for you. We didn't speak for 2 days. My mother left trays by my door like I was the one being hidden. My father stomped around, more silent than usual. When I walked past the back room, it was quiet. Too quiet. I started to worry they'd, done something drastic. I knocked once very softly. Daniel. I whispered. No answer. Panic flared. I tried the knob. Locked. Of course. That night, lying awake, the ceiling fan clicking overhead, I thought about all the things I'd been told growing up. That family secrets stay in the family. That you don't air dirty laundry. That calling outsiders into family business is a betrayal. I thought about Daniel's face when he said he thought he'd dreamed me. I thought about how he'd never had a friend, a teacher, a life outside that room. Then I thought about social studies class, about mandatory reporting, about the way we'd all tutate over an article about a family who kept a child locked up. How could no one know? The teacher had asked. How could no one say anything? That question circled in my head like a vulture. How could no one say anything? I was someone. I knew. 2 weeks before I was supposed to leave for college, I called the number we'd been given in health class for Child and Adult Protective Services. I did it from a payphone outside the grocery store 3 towns over, because I was still half convinced my parents could read my mind, never mind our phone bill. I told the woman on the other end that I wanted to report a vulnerable adult being kept in unsafe conditions. I gave our address. I gave his name. I described the room, the straps, the covered window. I gave my own name because they said anonymous reports were harder to follow up on, and because something in me knew that if I didn't put my name behind this, I'd spend the rest of my life telling myself it wasn't my business. The social worker came 3 days later. Of course she did it when my parents were home. That's how it works. They scheduled a home visit. My parents were furious. You did this, my father hissed at me as they sat in the living room with the woman, their pastor, and eventually a police officer. You think we don't know? Good, I said, my voice shaking but stubborn. Then I don't have to pretend I'm not sitting here. The social worker was professional, eyes scanning everything. My mother tried to charm her. We've given our lives to caring for him, she said, hands clasped like she was praying. We've sacrificed so much. The pastor, the same one who told my mom God never gives you more than you can handle, nodded along. This family is the backbone of our church, he said. They love that boy. Then the social worker asked to see the room. The moment that blanket came off the window, Daniel flinched like a mole seeing daylight. He shielded his eyes, then peeked through his fingers, pupils huge. It's bright, he whispered. The social worker's face didn't change much, but I saw her jaw tighten. She asked questions. How often did he go outside? When was the last time he'd seen a doctor? What therapies was he receiving? My mother's answers were slippery. The world is unkind, she said. We feel he's safer here. We know him best. Doctor visits are traumatic. He doesn't like strangers. The social worker took notes. The police officer looked uncomfortable. When they finally left, after what felt like hours, my parents turned on me like a pair of hunting dogs. You ungrateful little traitor, my father spat. After everything we've done, you call the government on us? You made us look like monsters, my mother sobbed. You have no idea what you've done. Daniel, sitting on his bed with the straps undone, looked between us with wide eyes. Am I in trouble? He asked. Did I do something bad? No, I said quickly. You did nothing wrong. Yes, my father snapped. He did. He talked. He's allowed to talk, I said. He's a person, Dad, not a secret. 2 weeks later, a judge ordered that Daniel be removed from the home and placed in a residential facility for his own safety, pending further evaluation. My parents were given the option to appeal to work with in-home services to make changes. They refused. They said the state was kidnapping their son. They said this was persecution. They said I'd broken the commandment to honor my father and mother. The day the transport van came, my mother clung to the porch post and screamed. My father shouted about lawyers. I sat on the steps numb, while two very kind, very tired-looking aides coaxed Daniel into the van with promises of new friends and a garden. Can Megan come? He asked, looking back over his shoulder. His eyes found mine. Will you come? I'll visit, I said, because it was the only promise I was sure I could keep. As they drove away, my mother turned on me, eyes wild. Are you happy now? She screamed. They took my son. You did that. You took him from me. No, I said, tears finally spilling over. You did that when you turned him into a prisoner. My father pointed down the street, toward the disappearing van. You don't have a family anymore, he said. You chose them. Remember that when you're alone. I left for college a week later. My mother didn't come to move-in day. My father dropped me at the curb, helped haul my boxes up 3 flights of stairs, and shook my hand like I was an employee quitting a job. Good luck, he said. You're going to need it. Then he walked away. For the first 6 months, I didn't visit Daniel. I told myself it was because I had no car, no money, no time. The truth was I was terrified. I'd blown up my family, called the state on my parents, and I didn't know how to look my brother in the eye and say, hey, sorry about your life imploding, but also you're welcome. Eventually, guilt outweighed fear. I borrowed a friend's car and drove an hour to the facility. It was nicer than I'd feared. Not some Dickensian asylum, but a low building with a courtyard, ramped walkways, bright art on the walls. The woman at the front desk recognized his name. You must be Megan, she said. He talks about you. I don't think I've ever both wanted and not wanted to hear something so badly in my life. He was in a common room, sitting at a table with a puzzle. Not a baby puzzle, a real one. His hair was cut properly now. He wore glasses. There was a wheelchair parked nearby, but he was in a regular chair, swinging one leg in time to music only he could hear. When he saw me, his whole face lit up. You came, he said, standing up a little too fast. I told them you were real. Cried, of course. We sat in that common room and drank bad coffee and talked about little things, the food, the staff, how he liked the therapy pool. He had a favorite nurse. He had a friend who stuttered. He had a schedule. Do you miss home? I asked, bracing myself. He tilted his head, thinking. I miss Mom's pancakes, he said, and the way Dad plays old songs. But, he looked out the window, where another resident was being pushed in his chair along a path lined with flowers. I like the garden, he said, and the birds, and the girl who reads stories, and the man who teaches us to paint. Did I do something bad? Is that why I had to leave? No, I said again, the only answer I could live with. You didn't do anything wrong. You deserved more air. Over the years, we built something like a sibling relationship on visiting hours and phone calls. My parents didn't visit at all for the first year, then sporadically after that. They told anyone who would listen that the state stole our son because our other daughter turned us in. In their version of the story, they were martyrs. I was Judas. Daniel, caught in the middle, tried to make peace in his own way. Mom cries when she comes, he'd tell me. She says she forgives you. Forgives me for what? I'd ask. For being selfish, he'd say, repeating her words like scripture. But I don't think you're selfish. I think you're loud. Loud. I'd laugh. You made noise, he'd say. Sometimes noise is good. 25 years later, I was the one who signed the paperwork when he moved from that facility to a smaller group home, then to supervised independent living in an apartment with support staff. My parents had long since stopped being his legal guardians. They didn't want the responsibility if they couldn't have the control. I became his durable power of attorney the year I turned 30. Are you sure? The lawyer had asked my parents. You'd be giving up your legal say. We've done our time, my father had said. She wanted him. She can have him. I want him alive, I'd said under my breath. Last year, my father had a heart attack, the kind that fells men who think they're too tough for statins. He died in his recliner watching the evening news. My mother called me hysterical. I drove over because even when you're mostly estranged, death does something to the lines you've drawn. The funeral was crowded. My father had been a deacon, a coach, a small business owner. People lined up to tell stories about how he'd fixed their AC during a heat wave, how he'd brought casseroles when their own parents died. My mother sat in the front row, black veil, tremulous hands, playing the role she'd been rehearsing her whole life, the grieving, long-suffering wife. At the luncheon afterward, over ham and scalloped potatoes in the church basement, the topic of Daniel came up. It always does now. He's the elephant at every family gathering. Some people barely remember him. Some remember him as the sick boy my parents sacrificially kept at home. Almost no one knows the full story unless they've heard it from me or Jess, who came back into my life quietly a few years after everything blew up, bringing with her her own complicated history with our parents. Your father did his best, my aunt said, patting my mother's hand, raising that boy at home when everyone told him to send him away. Not many men would do that. They tore our family apart. I felt a dozen eyes flick toward me, then away like a wave avoiding a rock. Are you still not speaking to your mother? One of my cousins asked me quietly later, near the coffee urn. I mean, now that your dad's gone. She's all alone. We speak, I said. We just don't live in each other's pockets anymore. What I didn't say was this. I screen her calls. I visit Daniel far more often than I see her. When she asks about bringing him home for holidays, I tell her he has plans. He does. With friends. With the people at his day program. With us sometimes in our house where my husband has built him a ramp and my kids know him as Uncle Danny, who tells the same jokes over and over and loves superhero movies. 2 months after the funeral, my mother asked to meet. Somewhere neutral, she said. We ended up at a chain restaurant off the highway. She ordered a salad and picked at it. I ordered coffee and watched her. Grief had shrunk her. She looked smaller without my father's presence to orbit. I can't stay in that house alone, she said eventually. Too many memories. Sell it, I suggested. Downsize. Move to an apartment. It's not that simple, she said. Your father never wanted to sell. He always said we'd leave it to you. I have my own house, I said. We don't need it. She flinched. So that's it, she said. You're just going to leave me there to rot? The old guilt flared up, hot and familiar. I tamped it down. You're not helpless, I said. You have savings. You have Social Security. You have a church full of people who think you walk on water. I have a son who needs me, she said sharply. Nobody takes care of Daniel like I do. You haven't been his caregiver in decades, I said. You don't even like his group home staff. You call them those people. You want to swoop in for holidays and pretend the last 25 years didn't happen. If you hadn't called those people, she snapped back, he'd still be under my roof where he belongs. If I hadn't called those people, he might be dead, I said, or tied to that bed, or still staring at the same four walls. You can rewrite it however you want in your head, Mom. I was there. I know what it was. She leaned forward, eyes blazing. You betrayed us, she said. You betrayed your father. You took our private struggle and turned it into a spectacle. You let strangers judge us. Strangers didn't strap their son down and cover his window for years, I said quietly. You did that. She sat back like I'd slapped her. For a moment, her face crumpled. We were scared, she whispered. We were young. We didn't know what to do. The doctors were cruel. They said words like institution. Your father couldn't stand the thought of people talking. We did the best we could. Maybe you did, I said. But when your best turned into harm, you doubled down instead of asking for more help. And then when someone finally forced you to change, you made them the villain. You sound just like your therapist, she said bitterly. Maybe she's right, I said. Maybe you should see one. She laughed short and sharp. My therapist is Jesus, she said, and he says to forgive. He also says to tell the truth, I said, and to care for the least of these without locking them away. We lasted another 10 minutes before the conversation looped back into the same circles it always did. Her sacrifices, my ingratitude, God's plan. When we parted in the parking lot, she hugged me stiffly. You'll regret this distance when I'm gone, she said into my ear. You'll wish you'd given me more time. You'll wish you'd brought Daniel home. He is home, I said, just not in your version of it. Now, sitting here typing this out, I can already hear some of the comments my family would make if they knew I was telling internet strangers our business. Air our dirty laundry, they'd say. Make us look like monsters. The truth is, no one in this story is all one thing. My parents are not horror movie villains. They are people who loved their son in their own twisted, fear-soaked way and also hurt him profoundly. They are people who brought casseroles to sick neighbors and also lied about their own child's existence. My mother changed 1,000 diapers, sat through seizures, fought with insurance companies. She also spent more energy maintaining the appearance of a normal family than she did advocating for services that could have helped all of us. My father worked overtime to pay medical bills. He also told me I didn't have a family anymore. When I called for help, they are complicated. So am I. I blew up my family at 17. I called the state. I testified. I chose my brother's safety over my parents' reputation. They say I stole their son. Sometimes, late at night, when my own kids are asleep down the hall and the house is quiet, I let myself wonder. If I'd kept my mouth shut, would any of us be happier? Would Daniel? He says he is in his simple, sincere way. He loves his routines. He loves his staff. He loves my kids who think it's perfectly normal to have an uncle who needs help tying his shoes but can beat them at memory games every time. He doesn't remember the worst parts of before the way I do. Trauma is funny like that. Sometimes the witnesses carry more of it than the people at the center. I see my parents aging alone in that house full of ghosts, and part of me aches. Part of me wants to rush in, scrub the kitchen, restock the fridge, drive my mother to appointments, let her cry on my shoulder about her loss. The rest of me remembers a dark room, a covered window, leather straps on a bed. It remembers a photo of a family missing a person. It remembers the way my father looked at me and said, "You don't have a family anymore." Like his love was a switch he could flip off. I chose not to expose my kids to people who think love is conditional like that. Maybe that's selfish. Maybe it's protective. Maybe it's both. So here's my question, Internet. If you found out at 17 that the brother you've been told died at birth was actually alive and being kept hidden and restrained in a window-covered storage room, so your parents wouldn't have to face pity and judgment, and you were the one who called social services and forced everything into the open, would you feel obligated, decades later, to maintain a relationship with those parents and include them in your disabled brother's life because they did their best and they're still your mom and dad? Or would you keep the distance you've built to protect yourself and your own kids, even if it means being forever labeled the ungrateful traitor who destroyed the family by refusing to keep their darkest secret?